Well, good morning, committee. Before I call roll, just so we have a roadmap of the morning, we have about 3 people online and 3 people who may still want to testify that we're holding over on House Bill 66 from Wednesday. My hope is we get done with House Bill 66 by about 8:30. Then we'll have Representative Larson here for his bill for about 15 minutes. He tells me it's quick, easy, and short with not a lot of testimony. And then we'll try to get into the Violence Against Healthcare Worker Bill about 8:45. So with that, Marilyn, if you'd call the roll.
Certainly. Good morning. Representative Chadwick. Representative Klauston. Representative Hornock.
Here.
Representative O'Hearn.
Here.
Representative Penn. Representative Trujillo. Representative Ward. Here. Representative Yin.
Here.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Here.
Thank
So with
you.
that committee, we are back to House Bill 66. Trying to find my notes. We had 3 more people who wanted to testify in the audience from Wednesday. I don't believe either. Ms. Declever, you were one of them, I remember. You were here Wednesday. Come on up. And then the 3 people from Wednesday who were in the room. There's some other people raising their hands today, but I'm going to try to get to the people who were waited all day Wednesday and then see where we're at. So Tony, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Tony Declever with the Wyoming Nurses Association. And I just wanted to share a couple of things. The Wyoming Nurses Association is opposed to this bill. The experience that Representative Ward shared on Wednesday was really, really unfortunate. Oh, thank you. Okay. As I said, the experience that Representative Ward shared on Wednesday was really, really unfortunate. But the practice of turning away patients is not common. I reached out to many of my nurses and received comments that even though they had masking requirements during the pandemic, they no longer have that unless the situation warrants. I've been in many healthcare facilities where masking is requested in the lobby, but can be removed in the exam room. On a personal note, I have been infected by a patient. This has landed me in the hospital 4 times on IV antibiotics, 2 weeks in the hospital and 8 weeks at home. Fortunately, the 5th time I received a PICC line and 8 weeks of IV antibiotics. And the 6th time, an oral antibiotic had been released that took care of the problem. Unfortunately, what I got from this patient, I cannot give to somebody else. So that's the fortunate thing. But why did I get this infection? Because as a young nurse, we didn't have the PPE that we do now. These preventative measures we now have are not meant to inconvenience. They are meant to protect. Masks, gloves, gowns, PPE are meant to protect. Businesses have the right to protect their employees and other customers from whatever hazard may come into their place of business. My cosmetologist has a sign on his door that all customers must wear a mask. Out of respect for him, I wear a mask. But if this bill were to pass, would he be in violation and subject to fine and jail time just because he's trying to protect himself and his customers? If the customer doesn't agree with the policy, the customer has the freedom to do their business elsewhere. We also oppose the repeal language, and even if this was removed, we would still oppose the bill. Thank you for your time, and I would stand for any questions.
That was for a few minutes 30.
All right.
Questions for the Wyoming Nurses Association. Representative Penn.
Thank you, Chairman. Could I just clarify, you said that you were infected with something from a patient, but you can't give it to them. Can you clarify how that could be?
Go ahead, Ms.
Sponsor, Representative Penn, the infection that I got is I'm very susceptible to it. And so it has kind of reared its ugly head 6 times in my lifetime. And I could get it. I mean, if I come in contact with the bacteria that I was exposed to, I'm more susceptible to getting a worse infection than a normal person would.
So we're talking about a bacterial thing, not a viral thing.
Chairman's answer, it was a bacteria.
Thank you.
Further questions from the Nurses Association? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Ms. Scribner, you were here on Wednesday and now you're online. You have about 1 minute, 30 seconds for your testimony when you're ready. Floor is yours, Ms. Scribner. But you're muted.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Jennifer Scribner, Lander, Wyoming. I'm in full support of this bill because I've lost all trust in our federal health agencies and government health policies. This bill protects our personal liberty and medical freedom that has been severely violated the last 3 years, especially. To note, on a personal note, we have a vaccine-injured child. I won't go through that. But I just want to give some facts about vaccines. 1962, there were 5 doses. In 1983, there were 24 doses. Or to date, there are 72 doses before a kid is actually 18 years old. There's a 1986 act that went into act that gave pharmaceutical companies, especially with vaccines, complete immunity from all liability injuries caused by any vaccines whatsoever. I don't feel our children are healthier today or even our adult population because of this. Autism in the 60s and 70s was 1 in 10,000. Today it's 1 in 44 in the United States and 1 in 35 actually in New Jersey. Infant mortality, we actually rank only 34th out of 44 countries. That actually says something to me. Rarely is informed consent ever given with any of these vaccines prior to infection. I don't believe, and neither have I ever been presented, the actual insert. Recently, a case in Tennessee where literally the godfather of vaccines, Catherine Edwards, she edited Plotkin Vaccines, the textbook that everyone follows in school and all their health agencies. She fully admitted that there have never been any studies to date that to rule out that they cause autism. Also, William Thompson, you can look him up, a whistleblower in the CDC. He actually has admitted for about 15 years that the CDC covered up and destroyed evidence that the MMR vaccine has caused autism more prevalent in boys. The gold standard for testing is actually randomized placebo-controlled studies with an inactive substance that causes no effect. There has been to date only one vaccine that has ever used a substance like that, like saline or a sugar pill. No studies have ever been done where we've actually looked for injuries that cause where we inject multiple vaccines. Because of some of these facts, and I could go on for about a week.
So though, but go ahead.
No, I was going to say, again, I don't understand as a public citizen how I'm able to trust these agencies and how any mandates could ever be forced on any of our public. We deserve bodily autonomy and we deserve medical freedom. And I appreciate your time and I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Scribner? Representative Penn.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Scribner, did you mentioned that you have a vaccine-injured child? Did your pediatrician or your doctor recommend to you that your child receive that vaccine before that happened?
Ms. Scribner?
Sure, Chairman, Representative Penn. They did. In fact, we felt very forced in that situation. We've only given one, and at 8 months, our child totally regressed, lost half of her speech, and started having seizures. To date, she's actually, I know this has been a discussion here a couple of days ago, but she's actually immunocompromised. She gets IVIG every 3 weeks and will until she's at least 18. And again, it has been contraindicated by many huge specialists that we give her any more vaccines whatsoever.
Okay, follow up, Representative Penn.
Thank you, Chairman. After that injury occurred, have you ever, even though it's contraindicated, have you ever been encouraged again by a doctor to have immunizations done on her?
Representative Penn, Chairman, yes, we have, and we've explained why that we will not do that, and we've done our own research for the last 4.5 years. Me and my husband have actually read every single clinical trial on vaccines, many books, talked to many professors as well as doctors out there. So.
Okay, further questions? Seeing none, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Mr. Daw, I hope I'm saying that right. Brian, the floor is yours.
Yes, sir.
30. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had prepared comments on Wednesday that I think are largely redundant with some other folks that have spoken today, and I'm going to omit that. Instead, I'm going to elaborate my perspective on some testimony that I heard from others.
Okay, did you just say your full name and where you're from?
Oh, thank you, sir. My full name is Brian Daw. I'm in Cheyenne, House District 8. So Wednesday, I had heard thoughtful concern regarding the vaccine repealer that we see in House Bill 66. And in the interest of time, perhaps anticipating a question, I support House Bill 66 in its current form and also with modifications to the vaccine repealer if that seems indicated. I do see merit in distinguishing in House Bill 66 vaccines that prevent infection and prevent spread of disease from a vaccine that fails. And I distinguish that from a different vaccine that fails to provide that significant social benefit. I think there's an obvious trade-off when a vaccine is both protecting the individual as well as protecting those people in the community around him or her. We do see some policies, however, particularly with respect to the COVID-19 vaccine, to choose an example, where in some cases, some instances, an individual is expected to yield sovereignty over their own body, where there is no associated social benefit that comes with that choice. The benefit is isolated to that individual. In those cases, I think that should be an individual's choice. On Wednesday, I heard testimony, and this was quite memorable, from a woman whose husband was denied medical care for failure to wear a mask. And I am certain that is rare. We heard from a woman this morning who explains that it's very rare. But in that case, there was either culture or policy that allowed hospital staff to say, if you are in enough pain, you will wear a mask. Now, that strikes me as deeply troubling that conversation could occur and that there is any motivation or culture that might lead to that. So I think the question is not if pushback on these policies is indicated, it's really how that pushback should manifest. And I hope this committee, with those observations in mind, can support the continued progress of House Bill 66 through the legislative process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dobb. Any questions? Representative Penn.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Dobbs, I'm trying to remember back how you phrased this, but you mentioned distinguishing between vaccines that prevent disease and could you tell me what you said there again? And then I have a question about that.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I stumbled over that. So there are vaccines, smallpox, polio, where we have clear historical evidence that vaccine not only prevents adverse symptoms, infection in the individual, but also support strongly the spread of the associated disease in people around the individual and their community, their church, et cetera. And that is a powerful social benefit that really, in my opinion, needs to be carefully weighed against individual choice. And that can be a difficult balance to strike. In the case of COVID-19, the CDC informs that we don't have that social benefit. It does not prevent the spread of COVID-19 and may not even necessarily prevent infection in the individual. And I think there is a clear and sharp distinction between these two groups of vaccines, ones that provide social benefit and at least one that does not.
You have a follow-up question, Representative Penn? Go ahead.
So my follow-up on that, thank you, Chairman, is it sounds to me like you're referring to the fact that the definition of a vaccine was changed by the CDC to include these COVID shots. Is that what you're referring to?
Mr. Dobb?
I'm aware that definition has changed. To be clear, I'm not sure that I could inform the old definition versus the new. Really basing my comments based on my own prior knowledge and prior experience. There are vaccines against smallpox we've virtually eradicated by way of vaccination. It prevents spread. It prevents spread vigorously. And that is a powerful benefit, both to the individual and to the community. And that should be respected and distinct from a vaccine that is not quite so strong in that regard.
Okay. Other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you very much for being here, Crosstown. Ms. Jacobs, you're up next. You were here Wednesday. Floor is yours.
Can you guys hear me okay? All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Taylor Jacobs. I am from Lander, Wyoming. I am a school psychologist, a board certified behavior analyst, a business owner, and a Wyoming native. Since 2011, I have provided psychoeducational services and assessments for children in the preschool through 12th grade setting, and my evaluations help determine if a student qualifies for special education services. In August of 2021, after the start of the school year, I was notified by the primary district I contracted with that they were requiring all employees to receive the COVID vaccine, and I had 10 days to provide proof. I respectfully notified the administration that I would be seeking a medical and/or religious exemption for the experimental vaccine. I was told verbally that rather than dealing with the process of me applying for these exemptions, they were letting me go. Not only did I receive financial loss because of this, I was shamed and ostracized by many people that I considered friends. But it is the children of this great state that were truly impacted by situations like this. Students that required specialized testing by a certified professional in a unique niche had to wait months and months to have services and testing provided to them. Many students who are already behind because of school closures and online learning, compounded with the fact that they had developmental or learning disabilities, fell further behind and will most likely never recover from the lack of instruction and supports. So I ask that you please vote yes for House Bill 66, support the citizens of Wyoming and their personal healthcare decisions. Thank you for your time, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Jacobs? Representative Penn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Jacobs, I actually have a couple questions. In interest of time, I'll get them both out and so you can maybe answer them both at the same time to save time. So the first is, you mentioned that the school required it of all employees. Do you have knowledge of how many employees were impacted by their mandate? And my second question is, prior to issuing this, did they come out with any measures before that as far as infection control, before they came out and said you had to have this vaccine?
Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Penn. Yes, so there were approximately 20 employees that were all let go from their position at the school district. Not one medical or religious exemption was accepted for any of the staff members. If they were teachers and in a contract, they were put into rooms and isolated, having to wear masks, and they would do online learning for those students that were in the online program. If they were classified staff, that would be like paraeducators or custodians or kitchen employees, they were just let go right when, right out during the process. So anytime throughout the year. So just in all, disservice to our children. And then as far as the steps that were taken and measures, our staff were all required to wear masks. None of us were able to get exemptions for that. We had to also undergo weekly COVID testing. So we'd have to come into the building and do our COVID testing. And if anybody had tested positive, they had to be out for at least 2 weeks. And so, yes, there were many measures in place before requiring something as strict as mandating vaccines for all employees.
Okay, other questions? Seeing none.
Thank you.
So again, I know were you here on Wednesday, Mr. Meyer? I don't believe so. Mr. Hackman, you were. Carolyn, please come up. You were. I'm really trying to get through this bill by 8:30, and so I promised about 5 more people, including 1 more online.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Representative Ward.
I am not sure the positions of those who want to testify, but I implore you to please hear all the testimony, even those who weren't here on Wednesday.
So Representative Ward, Representative Penn, Representative O'Hearn, all have bills in this committee coming up, and I'm perfectly happy, but there are another 9 bills in this committee other people would like to hear. I'm very well aware that many of you ran exactly on this issue, and it is probably the most important issue. So if you committee, I'll just take a straw poll. Those of you who want me to hear from everybody today, just raise your hand and we can go till 9.
How many more people are in the audience?
5 and 3 online. So that could be another 20 minutes. That work? Okay. All right, we'll give her a minute and a half.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Passano, welcome. Welcome back, former chairman of this committee. Floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm Carolyn Passano with the Wyoming Healthcare Association, a nursing home association. And I want to thank you very much for this discussion and looking at what we're weighing here. I won't reiterate or go through what the Business Alliance said or the hospitals or the Holland and Hart attorney, but would like to say that we are a nation of laws, and that's what we're talking about now. And it is an important discussion that we're having here because of what has happened the last 3 years. And I think I would like to tell you that I am unvaccinated. I have feelings both ways and would like to talk a little bit about our background in Wyoming with the federal government giving the state money for all various kinds of entities. And I'm going to go back as far as when
Go back at least for a couple more sentences and finish your thoughts.
Okay,
please.
I'm going back to Governor Ed Hirschler in his third term. And at that point in time, we were, of course, getting a lot of money for roads. And we had 18 as the year of drinking age, and it was 21 nationally. And we were brought to heel on that issue because contractors could not get money to build our roads and bridges if we did not comply. The other issue during that time was the 55 mile an hour that we said we would not comply with. And lo and behold, we ended up having a special session and complying with that in order to get the money to make our state drivable, if you will. This isn't new. It is something that we do need to talk about. I'm glad to be here and able to be a part of the discussion because it is something, the more money we take, the deeper we get in, and we have to realize that. Thank you very much, Representative Ward, for bringing this forward. Appreciate it.
Questions for Ms. Passano? Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did I hear right? You were the past chairman of this committee?
Yes, that's correct.
Well, thank you very much. You have given us big shoes to fill here. Just to be clear, what is your position on this particular bill? For or against?
Go ahead, Ms. Passano.
I think by the way, I have a law degree. That will tell you, I believe that we have no choice at this point. However, I believe if any of you are going to NCSL, that it is the right thing to do to bring this to NCSL, get other states to work with you, and it has a lot of bearing if that is a possibility for any of you.
Further questions? Thanks very much, Carolyn. And I would mention Representative Passano's service predates mine, so it hasn't been the previous, I think we've had 4 or 5 chairmen of this committee since before, but I'm just telling you, we stay active for a long time. I know you have some statistics, Hospital Association, but I might save you till last to answer some questions. We're going to go to Ms. Kostreva online, and then I have 3 more people we'll bring in online, and then school nurses, come on forward and we'll have you up next. Go ahead, Patricia, floor is yours.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Zonlitzer and committee. My name is Patricia Kostreva, and I live in Riverton. And this bill really hits home for me. My employment as a registered nurse was terminated on August 27th, 2021 for not taking the COVID shot. My choice, the choice I was given was take the shot or get fired. And which meant complying or lose my livelihood. I lost my livelihood. I have been a nurse approximately 20 years, and it's my understanding that my employer at the time had over 200 employees. Many lost their jobs over the COVID vaccination requirement. And I will just say as an aside, there was and still is a curious media silence over this matter of people who actually lost their jobs, at least in Wyoming. Due to financial and other pressures, many of the employees I worked with went ahead and took the COVID vaccine. Their liberty as a citizen of the United States of America and the state of Wyoming was clearly violated. The harms extend well beyond that of financial.
Any questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Patricia, for being here today.
Thank you.
Whoever wants, Mr. Moody, sure. Yep.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Name is Mark Moody here in Laramie County, and Mr. Chairman, one of your constituents. I am fully vaccinated against COVID-19. I think the vaccine works, and it probably helped me recover from the Omicron virus, so it is a good vaccine. However, this bill has nothing to do with vaccines, nothing to do about masks. It's about three things: freedom, liberty, and personal choice. If people believe it doesn't work, that's their choice. People know what's best for them and their children. They have the right to make that choice. The government, businesses, and people do not have that right. And I'll conclude, I urge an aye vote because this is looking for freedom. And I'd like to say, I rewatched the videos on Wednesday. Most regular citizens support this bill, but paid lobbyists and CEOs don't support it because of the financial with the federal dollars and billions of dollars, et cetera. Let's remember what Congresswoman Hageman said. We need to not rely on the federal government because it's on a fiscal cliff. So we need to worry about people's liberties. We do need federal dollars for roads, no denying that. But some other things we need to look at from a state perspective. Be Wyoming sovereign, as Congresswoman Hageman said. And I'll be happy to take questions.
Questions for Mr. Moody? Cindy Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Come on down. While you're getting situated, we'll go online to Darcy. Welcome, Ms. Goodger. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Zwanitzer, from Mills, Wyoming, HD 59. I would like to remind the 67th legislature that their duty is to represent we the people, not big corporations, big pharma, special interests, or the government. HB 66 is essential to protect our God-given rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is congruent with the United States and the Wyoming Constitution. Where are the accommodations for people who have lung and breathing issues? For those of us who want to breathe freely and without impediment? How many times must I watch my mother pass out in a Banner Health facility because they force her to wear a mask, taking away her right to breathe? The response we get over and over again when we advocate for our rights is, we don't care, this is policy. Since when does policy trump the medical oath to do no harm? I personally was discriminated against in the workplace. The nonprofit I worked for put in their board policy that no exemptions, medical or religious, were to be honored. Because I would not comply, I was forced to resign. I included a copy of Article 1, Section 38 in my resignation letter. We the people have a right to receive goods and services along with medical care without being forcibly suffocated. Remember, you represent us, not the entities that profit from compliance to draconian unconstitutional mandates. Thank you for giving me voice, and I stand for questions.
Thank you. Questions from Ms. Goodger?
I have a question.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Gudger, could you you mentioned your mom and her ability to breathe. Could you go into more detail concerning what happened?
Yes, my mother grew up in a smoker's home, so she has interstitial lung disease, severe damage to her lungs. We've had several instances where she has a lot of complex medical issues, and we've had to go to Banner Health because it's our only option here. They force her to wear a mask. Her oxygen sats drop into the mid to low 70s. When we were in the emergency room, the issue was resolved, but they were hesitant to release her because her sats were in the low 70s. The nurse consulted with the doctor, and while she was gone, I ripped the mask off of her face and her sats went up to 96. When they returned, they would not acknowledge that her SATs were 96. They acted as if they were still in the mid to low 70s and asked her if she was comfortable going home with in such a state of hypoxia. Another instance, she passed out at a clinic. I ripped the mask off. They were about ready to call the ambulance because her pulse was weak and thready. I said, look, it's the mask. And they said, we don't care. This is policy. You must abide by our policy. So I am tired of the abusive, just pushing of these draconian laws. I know ADA actually is about employment, not about patients who are trying to access medical services. But her lung disease is not going away, and she has a right to breathe. Everybody has a right to breathe. This bill does not take away the hospital's right to mask their employees. So if they want to have that, they can do that. But our rights as patients, we need the freedom to breathe. And people like my mother need accommodations for her right to breathe oxygen, because a mask for her is dangerous. It does her harm. If I wasn't there to catch her when she passed out, she would have fallen and hit her head, which would have caused more serious damage. This has not happened once. This has happened multiple times in a Banner facility. They refuse to chart it and they refuse to acknowledge it. Thank you, Representative Ward and Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you. Further questions, committee? Seeing none. Thank you much. Welcome, Ms. Farmer. Minute 30.
Thank you. My name is Janet Farmer. I am a school nurse here in Cheyenne, and I am the current Wyoming Director to the National Association of School Nurses. I would like to register my personal and professional opposition to this bill. We've heard lots of testimony about the benefits of childhood immunizations, polio, measles, mumps, rubella. I'm not going to go into that. I will let you know that as a very young child, I had the distinct honor of being the sentinel case of chickenpox in our community, which spread to probably 80% of the rest of the community. So I can attest that there are benefits to those diseases, to those vaccines, I'm sorry. The section that we are really concerned about is in section 1B, where it discusses any other infectious virus or disease vaccination status. Even if the language pertaining to mandatory vaccinations is removed, this language is detrimental to many services provided in school health offices. For example, some districts perform throat swabs for strep or flu with parent permission. We do assessments for pink eye, impetigo, fever, general illness. This language implies that even if students are ill if staff are ill, we could not require them to go home. So with this in place, schools would become even larger incubators of illness and disease. Furthermore, the current language would prevent school personnel from asking for immunization records or a titer test to determine if a child is immune to an immunization. Thank you. I stand for questions.
Questions, Ms. Farmer? Representative Hornock, and then we'll go to the other side. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for coming and testifying. If that language were removed, would you be more inclined to favor this bill?
Go ahead, Ms. Farmer.
Chairman Zwanitzer, Representative Hornock. Perhaps, certainly the language to remove mandatory or to repeal the mandatory immunizations should be removed. The language that covers other viral illnesses just is so broad, it's difficult. It would be difficult for us as school nurses or health personnel in schools to assess for anything or require people to go home. So it'd have to be significantly changed, maybe specific to COVID, if that was the intent of the bill.
Okay. Representative Ward, question? Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for being here. We're going to go online to Mr. Scribner. Floor is yours, Nick.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Nick Scribner. I'm a Lander, Wyoming resident, and I'm here to express my support for House Bill 66 and encourage you to vote yes. While the situation with COVID may largely be in the rearview mirror, we should be proactive as a state legislature to discourage history repeating itself and protect medical freedom for Wyoming citizens. I do not want to be discriminated against or required a medical intervention that can cause potential long-term harm. And to illustrate that, I want to give some data from the VAERS system, which stands for the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. It's a voluntary system managed by the CDC. Through July 1st of 22, in regards to the COVID shot, there was over 15,000 cases of myocarditis reported, 10,000 cases of seizures, 6,500 cases of Bell's palsy. And more recently, as far as the end of December, there's been over 30,000 deaths reported on this. But there's also an underreporting factor of this data of about 31. So basically take all those numbers, multiply them by 31. And that's based on research from Dr. Jessica Rose, published in Science, Public Health Policy, and the Law. And just to frame a reference, in 1976, when the swine flu vaccine was pulled, it was pulled after only 25 deaths were reported. Now, this the VAERS system isn't just specific to COVID. There's also been a lot of injuries by other vaccines. And with that, I'll take any other questions.
Questions, Ms. Scribner? Not seeing any, Nick. Thank you much.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Miller, since you're standing, come on down.
This is a standing committee?
We are a standing committee, but you can sit for today. Welcome.
Good morning, Chairman Zwanitzer, members of the committee. My name is Steve Milia here in Cheyenne. I have a master's degree in public health education, worked for the state of Wyoming for 20 years in infectious diseases and environmental. Plus I worked for City of Houston Health Department as a senior public health educator for STDs, HIV, and other infectious diseases. I fully support this bill, and the gentleman just was on. He sort of stole a lot of my thunder, but added a lot to it because of the VAERS reports is true. I am fully vaccinated, but not with this substance called a vaccine. I was in the Navy Reserve for 31 years, and I got just about every shot they had, including anthrax. I have no problem. I used to do a lot of vaccine preventable audits on public health nursing offices and other places. I know a person in the media industry here, very prominent, won't say their name, but this person got the initial shot plus 2 boosters and still got COVID twice. And there are many situations out there like that. All of the medical professionals that had disagreed with this in the beginning and throughout, if they didn't agree with CDC and the what we call the prescribed narrative, they were all silenced. They either lost their jobs or they were silenced one way or the other, disciplined. And that's not science, that's more like politics. The masks that people wear, I see out there, are primarily the surgical masks are primarily for bloodborne pathogens. If we all had masks on right now, they would not be airtight. They'd be blowing out all of our exhalations, and we'd all be breathing it back in. So I support this bill, and I ask you to pass it.
Okay, questions, Mr. Milia. Representative Clouston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question that I'm just wondering about. You know, COVID seems to be like we're getting different variants, right? One of my pauses is, could we see COVID continue to have variants that are more severe than what we've seen in the past?
No, anything's possible, yes.
Further questions?
Just a quick comment.
Representative, make sure it's a question, Representative Ward. Go ahead.
Well, is it okay if I thank the good speaker for his service?
Certainly.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Because we'd agree. As a state employee for many years, doing the Lord's work, as the Department of Health would say. Thank you. Mr. Meyer? Now, how many other people who are here at 8 o'clock still want to testify on this bill? Were you here, Mr.? Oh, sure. We'll finish up with Mr. Sprosk right after you, Mr. Meyer. Go ahead.
There should be more people online, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry.
So Representative Ward, everybody who had their hand raised at 8 when we started from the last meeting, I think I have 2 more online who are just popping up, which worries me. So
There's one who's been on and off because of connection issues.
I'll work on that in just a second. Go ahead, Mr. Meyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Scott Meyer with the Wyoming Bankers Association. As you may or may not know, but your Wyoming banks are one of the most highly regulated industries in Wyoming. We are subject to all the federal rules, including Bank Secrecy Act and Know Your Customer, as well as all the rules and regulations that are imposed on our Wyoming banking division. that affects every one of us. We stand in opposition to this bill. This bill could very well put us in conflict between the federal and the state laws. And while that maybe just seems like a conflict, it does put our banks with their charters at risk. The charters are the most important thing, and that's what makes us have the ability to do banking in this state. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I stand for any questions.
Question for the Bankers Association? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zabrowski, welcome. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Dan Zabrowski, Precinct Person 8-5, Casper, Wyoming. Just a couple quick things. It was very inconvenient to deal with this, and I'm going to use the term fake pandemic in our community, and the contention it caused going into the businesses, going into the hospitals, was rough on a lot of people. Hurt a lot of businesses, hurt a lot of people. I know the good gentleman that just spoke talks about the beef we would have with the federal government. We have got to get that out of our minds. We have a 10th Amendment that protects the sovereignty of this state. And if our businesses knew that our government stood behind them, our state government, they would not cave to this stuff. And we wouldn't need a bill like this. I know so many businesses that did not want to go along with this pandemic, fake pandemic. I mean, if you listen to Fox News and CNN, you thought we were all dying off. Those doctors that were censored and kicked off Twitter, when you did search them out and listen to their analysis, you realized something was up. So we need to protect ourselves from the next fake pandemic. So I support this bill and urge you to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Question, and did you maybe state your name for the record? I'm not sure if Marilyn did you?
Dan Zabrowski.
Great. Any questions, Mr. Zabrowski? I thought you were reaching for the mic. All right, thank you very much. With that, Representative Ward, the person isn't currently there. They have been, and if they re-enter the room, I will get to them. Hospital Association, you were asked to provide some numbers for us, so come on down. And I just apologize to people who are jumping online who want to talk after the Hospital Association and perhaps one more person, Mr. Urso, if he shows back up. But we're going to wrap it up and move to working the bill. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman,
And
committee
please
members,
keep
Eric
it to the-
Boley with Wyoming Hospital Association. I was given some homework. I think it was Representative Trujillo. This is some preliminary numbers. I've been pretty busy over here, but I have statistics that I think would be a good sampling. I have statistics from 7 nursing homes, 7 of our small critical access hospitals, and 5 of our PPS hospitals, so our larger hospitals. There have been almost 1,700 religious exemptions given, 106 medical exemptions, and there have been 29 denials. Of those, 20 of those come from one facility, a nursing home. And then with one caveat, I haven't been able to do the numbers, but about 5% of the employees that file for exemptions at CRMC were denied. They gave 160 religious and 90 medical. So I think the trend that's forming here is that if they're filling out the religious or medical exemptions, they're being honored. And of some of the medical exemptions that were denied, they were encouraged to do a religious exemption, and then they were granted those religious exemptions.
Any questions on those numbers from the Hospital Association? Representative O'Hearn.
Are new hires required being vaccinated?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Horde, they are. We're still under the mandate, the vaccine mandate.
Representative Ward.
The president of Banner Health in Casper testified that no exemptions were denied. Do you know how that connects to Banner Health in Casper? Your statistics.
If you know, Mr. Boley.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ward, my understanding is there were 178 exemptions in the Banner facilities. There are 4 facilities in our state. There's Wyoming Medical Center. Torrington is a Banner facility, and there are 2 that are managed by Banner. There were 178 exemptions given and 0 denials.
And I'm guessing the person next to you might have some additional numbers.
I have a follow-up.
Okay. Do you have that answer for Representative Ward, Ms. Shickich?
Representative Ward, my name is Mary Lynn Schickish, members of the committee. I represent Banner Health here in Wyoming, which has 4 hospitals, and I'm sorry I haven't been here. I had hip surgery, and so I'm slow to get started this session. Would you please ask that question again, Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Representative Ward.
Yes, at your desks, committee members, you have an example of a religious exemption denial from the very person it happened to. This happened at Banner Health in Casper. My question is, Mr. Porter testified that there were no exemptions denied. I wanted to know how these statistics applied to Banner Health in Casper, Wyoming.
If you know,
Mr.
Ms.
Chairman.
Shickich.
Representative Ward, I didn't understand him to say that exactly. I believe if they did say that, the intention was to say that no religious exemption were denied. And if someone did have a denial, they were encouraged to reapply, say if it was medical, for a religious exemption. Out of the entire Banner hospital system in Wyoming, there's 1,618 employees. And of those, 30 throughout the entire system chose either to not get vaccinated or to apply for a religious exemption. So as a result, they were given what was called a voluntary, they had a voluntary resignation.
Follow-up?
Yep.
Mr. Chairman?
Nope.
I would like to testify after hearing this.
Well, thank you, Representative Alaman, but please don't interrupt my committee again. Representative Ward.
Are you aware, have you seen, can I give this to you?
Representative Ward, sure, I probably won't be able to answer the specifics to it until I check back with the hospital.
I think the overall question is, Ms. Shickich, and I think you were here to hear the testimony on Wednesday. So if you would go check and maybe get back to this committee with a further delineation of those numbers, and I think that would
Thank
be
you.
appreciated.
Yeah, as all due courtesy to you, Representative Ward, I'd be glad to follow up on this one specifically and any others that you have questions with.
Any other questions from the committee? Seeing none, we're going to go to Mr. Urso online. Floor is yours, Richard. Thank you, Hospital Association.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, committee members. I'll just give you some information. I've done 11 years of science work inventing an FDA-approved drug. I work with viral disorders and also with lipid nanoparticles. So I can give you some science background on this. I think that'll help the argument. First, with masking, there's 14 randomized controlled trials on mask. 0 have shown an improvement with 000 basically have shown an improvement with viruses. They do work well for bacteria, just like the woman earlier spoke to. So basically, I think it's virtue signaling if you do it. I always usually tell people it's like peeing in a pool with a bathing suit on. It's not going to help. And R95, N95 doesn't work, but R99, R100 PAPRs, they work. So when you work in a viral lab, there's certain masks that you use, and they're not N95 and below. Okay, and that's number one. Number two, it's not a civil liberties thing on the mandate, really, from my point of view. It's bad medicine. The lipid nanoparticle distributes it to your ovaries, your brain, your heart, distributes it everywhere, causing, even in the original Pfizer trials, 183% more serious adverse events in that group. The original Pfizer trials, 183% more serious adverse events in those patients, and 22 deaths in the first 90 days in the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. 94% of the deaths in England are in the triple vaccinated. There's a class switch, IgG class switch, that it gives it, instead of neutralizing effects, it gives it a protecting effect. So bottom line is, it's not a civil liberties thing. This is bad medicine. All right. So if you sign mandates, you're basically, in a sense, hurting people. And that's why I urge you not to go forward, to go. I believe in this bill. I think it makes a lot of sense. I'll leave it there and ask for questions.
Thank you. Questions for Dr. Urso?
Question.
Representative Ward, go ahead.
I missed the beginning of your background. Could you give a little more details about your background and your credentials? Thank you.
Sure.
So yeah, I worked in a biochem lab, in a tissue culture lab, invented an FDA-approved drug, nerve growth factor, for that basically won the Nobel Prize. And I figured out how to use it on the human body as a wound healing drug. Also, I'm a clinician. I have one of the biggest clinics in the United States in ophthalmology. We see about 300,000 patients per year. I'm an ophthalmologist by training as clinical. My research background is not, though. My research background is in inflammation, wound healing, and some viral work.
Okay.
I also was the chief oncologist at MD Anderson Hospital for 6 years.
Further questions, Representative Ward?
One more question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And sorry, sometimes I forget to direct my
No,
questions
all
to
good.
you.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if you can elucidate what you know about the effects of the COVID-19 vaccine specifically on children. Thank you.
So in this area, this is where it's all risk, no reward. And let me explain why. Couple reasons. One, they didn't actually test it to see if it even did anything but make antibodies. So you have to understand it did nothing in terms of infection. It didn't. And I think in general, that's really important to know, because they did the negative data on many of this studies. But let me just kind of sum it up. 28 million children from 5 to 11 have already had the virus. 80% of them, that means like 22 million. So if there was a perfect vaccine, what you would have is you'd save 6 people in the United States if it was a perfect vaccine. We know it doesn't, it's not a perfect vaccine. So what you're doing is you're giving this to these people that already have had it. And it causes like a couple of main problems. One, a hyperimmune response in the first week. Some of those children are going to die. So 22 million of those have already had it. They're going to die from a hyperimmune response, some of them. More than 6, I can tell you that. The other thing, if you look at the VAERS database, you'll see quite clearly that it's the most deadly vaccine rollout in the history that we've ever had. I've never spoken up about vaccines. It's my first time. I also, as I said, work with these lipid nanoparticles. They're going into these children's ovaries, testing. If you look at the sperm counts as we get older, a 35% decrease in sperm counts from the vaccine. That's a big study in Israel. That's just the data. It does seem to recover. But what happens after 4 or 5 of these? This is a personal choice issue in my mind in a big way. It just should not be a mandated vaccine. It's dangerous, and for the most part, and especially in the children, it's unwarranted.
All right. Further questions? Representative Penn.
Thank you, Chairman. Just briefly, in interest of time, could you delineate for me the difference between an ophthalmologist and an optometrist? I think there might be some questions as to if you're a doctor.
Yeah. Basically, I've done about 34,000 surgeries in my career. I'm an anterior skull-based surgeon. I've done a lot of work through the sinuses, that is. So my background's in oncology. I have a huge background in things that most ophthalmologists never do. It doesn't have any bearing on my science background, though, for the most part.
Representative Hornick, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. So we've heard some information or we've heard a question about different strains, and we do know that the COVID-19 virus has mutated a little bit. Can you just talk to us about the virus or the effectiveness of the vaccines on different strains and what you think about that?
Yeah. So this is a very interesting question. There's a secret social life of viruses. When you see viruses, you're looking at basically like gnats. They're not all a carbon copy. So they're aunts, uncles, first cousins. So what happens, the vaccine has neutralized, especially in the first and second shots, can neutralize the virus to some extent, the spike protein. What's happening after that, though, is putting pressure to move it towards the areas where it's not so effective, so that the portions of the virus that are in the host are able to actually, in a sense, use the resources because they're not being neutralized. So you're seeing, basically what I'm saying is the vaccination program is actually creating the mutants. If you look at the Wall Street Journal last week, came out the nice article kind of explaining that. But basically that's what's happening. They're kicking the can down the road. Because it's a leaky vaccine, you will never have the pandemic end if we continue on this pathway.
All right. Thank you very much for being here, Doctor. We're at 8:55, so I'm going to close public comment. My apologies to those who didn't get to testify, but I hope that everybody who was here at 8 o'clock Wednesday morning, I'm fairly confident, got their voice to be heard. With that, committee, what is your pleasure on the bill?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Ward.
I'd like to bring 2 amendments.
So Representative O'Hearn has moved the bill. Is there a second? Seconded by Penn. Representative Ward, which amendment do you want to start with?
The one with more lines, it ends in 704. This amendment, the effect of this amendment, do I need to go down there?
Nope.
Okay.
You're welcome to, but I'm fine if you want to stay there for amendments.
Okay, so the effect of this amendment is to remove the repealer. So the part that talks about childhood vaccines, I'm removing, and all the language in the bill associated with the other vaccines to narrow this bill to only COVID-19.
Is there a second? Seconded by Hornock. Discussion on amendment committee. It's proposed amendment 4 in front of you. On the top, it'll end with 704. Discussion on the amendment. Seeing no discussion and hearing someone say the word question. Question being called. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. That, Marilyn, that was, I believe, 8-1. Other questions or amendments? Representative
The
Ward.
second amendment. The second amendment is labeled 703 at the top. It reduces the penalty from $5,000 and, I'm sorry, it reduces the penalty of $5,000 to $750 and the jail time from 1 year to 6 months.
Is there a second? And everyone's aware this is one that ends in 703 on the top. Second for that amendment. Representative Hornick, that's a second? Okay, discussion on the amendment.
Question?
Seeing Representative Hornick?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that I guess a question, we're talking about a misdemeanor, does this set the fines and the penalties for the misdemeanor? Is this more standard with other laws? That's what I'm curious about.
Representative
Chairman.
Ward, go ahead, or I can, go ahead.
Yes, I asked specifically that it be more in line with the standard misdemeanor, and yes, this penalty is more in line with the standard misdemeanor.
Standard misdemeanor, 6 months and 750 to 5,000. So instead of the top of the misdemeanor, it's the bottom of the misdemeanor.
I would.
If you're here long, you can serve on judiciary for a couple terms, and you know all these things. All right, further discussion. Representative Clauston.
So with this amendment, I'm glad the fines were lowered. I mean, these were more severe than a DUI penalty, but I still feel like they're too severe. There's a private business owner that is asking that someone wear a mask or has to be, is asking about the vaccination standard, and they want to stick to their guns. I just feel this is still too severe.
If this amendment passes or fails, you're welcome to bring another amendment after. Further discussion on this amendment? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. No. That amendment is passed. Other amendments? The other two with your... Okay. Representative Yen.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I will move on page 4 to strike lines 1 through 4.
And that would be the entire penalty section, Representative Yen?
That is correct.
Is there a second for that motion? Seconded by Clauston first. Discussion on deleting subsection 3, the top of page 4, so there would be no 750 or no 6 months. Go ahead, Representative Yen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that the criminal penalty overall is really the aspect that I'm concerned with, as well as, we're also talking about all the entities that take federal money where there's a link between the federal money and a requirement there. But at the very least, I don't really want to make Wyomingites guilty of a misdemeanor or guilty of any criminal penalty. And if a civil penalty amendment wanted to come through in the future, that's fine. But I just wanted to make sure that we didn't have the criminal penalty.
Further discussion? The amendment is on the floor. Discussion on the amendment. Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there is a valid point that that is brought by this. However, I think what we've seen in the last couple of years with the people losing their jobs, with the severity of the problems that some of this stuff has created, I think there does need to be a little bit of teeth that we have in this bill. So that's just what my perspective on this. I would be in favor of keeping something in the bill that does penalize for this. Thank you.
Okay, we can always amend until we get it right. Further questions? Representative Ward, discussion.
Yes, I would agree that this takes, I mean, it essentially guts the bill. If there's no penalty for not obeying the bill, then it's not really a bill, is it?
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
No.
Show of hands, all those in favor, raise your hand. That amendment passes. Back on the bill. Further discussion or amendments? Seeing none, would someone like to call the question?
Call the question.
Question being called. Marilyn, if you would call the roll on House Bill 66.
I'm sorry,
Represent-
Mr. Chairman. Representative Clouston seems to
Did you
have,
have, was there, I didn't mean to eliminate discussion. Any discussion before the roll? Go ahead, Representative Clouston.
You know, this is something that's been brought up for 3 years since the pandemic has started, right? I think we can all agree that this was handled poorly. We've lost the trust in the CDC. A lot of our personal rights were violated. I want to applaud Ms. Ward for bringing this up, right? This is something that's all we used to talk about was COVID and should you take the shot or not take the shot and what freedoms were violated. I don't want to handcuff our hospitals and our healthcare facilities in the future. I am a little worried if COVID becomes a more severe strain. We haven't controlled it. These vaccines haven't worked. I just don't want to handcuff us in the future that if something worse with COVID comes on, that we're not able to take precautions that we may need. So I'm going to be a no on this vote. I have some worries about the federal funding. What I'm really happy about is that we're talking about this at this length. And I just think we're a little early on this. I think we need to get together with some of the other states. And if any more mandates come like this, I think the states are going to rise up. Hopefully these lessons have been learned and we're not going to let these past mistakes happen. So that's my feelings on this. Thank you.
Was there other public comment? Go ahead.
Chairman, may I
Representative
please? Thank you,
Or
Chairman.
committee comment.
I would pose that this is the states rising up. We've had the experience of the last few years to say that this is it. We are rising up, and Wyoming should be the first to lead that charge. This isn't a new discussion. This discussion we feel like it's new because this time it's talking about COVID, which we've never dealt with before. But this is a discussion that's happened again and again over time. Just last week before session convened, all legislators were required to sit in and discuss sexual harassment and how that's not acceptable. We don't think that sexual harassment is acceptable. At this time, it's not something that our culture finds good, but that hasn't always been the case. Not that long ago, it was completely acceptable for a male boss to harass a woman. So I don't think that because our culture says that this is acceptable or this isn't acceptable, I don't think that's a good line to take is what does the culture tell us. Go back in history a little bit further and people of different skin colors weren't allowed to walk in the same door. They weren't allowed to use the same drinking fountain. Looking back on that, we don't find that acceptable, but in that time frame, it was perfectly acceptable. Just because the culture allows it doesn't mean that it's acceptable to infringe on a human right. The argument can be made that because this is, we're dealing with health and well-being of population, that this is different than those situations. Let's go back in history even a little bit further. Before the Holocaust, the Jews were labeled as being unclean and disease-ridden, and that's how people were able to get on board with what ended up happening. So I thought, this is a tough decision because there's a lot on both sides of this argument. There's a lot of weight on both sides of this argument. So I went to my Constitution and I looked at that and said, well, okay, what does our governing document tell us about how to handle this situation. I'll say that it talks a lot about liberty, and that's a high priority. We do, as was testified, mentioned in our testimony that we've heard, we do have a section on healthcare. Article 1, Section 38. It says that each competent adult shall have the right to make his or her own healthcare decisions, and a parent for their child. Paragraph D of that section says the state of Wyoming shall act to preserve these rights from undue infringement. The state shall act to preserve these rights. Moving up, I didn't skip over it. Some might try to point this out, that paragraph C says that the legislature may determine reasonable and necessary restrictions on rights under this section to protect the health and general welfare. It says that the legislature may make those decisions. It doesn't say that the public sector can make those decisions. But outside of that, it says that they may determine what is reasonable and necessary. So what's reasonable here? Is it reasonable that we've allowed all these things to happen? COVID has done a lot of things in the last couple of years, but one of the things that it's done is it's outlined some of the flaws in human nature, and that being fear. And how do we respond when we're fearful? Reason is the ability to listen to logic, and reason is performed. To reason is, you do that without emotion, you do that without fear, because when fear enters the room, logic leaves. And so we have to make sure that we're going about these situations logically. And so, when COVID hit us, people wanted to do the right thing. I don't think that people intentionally set out to be tyrannical and to steal other people's liberties, but we were afraid and we wanted to do something. We wanted to protect people. And so, maybe somebody did pull out this constitution and say, look, it does say that we can infringe on rights if it's to protect the health of others. I don't believe that, especially in the public sector, that there is the authority to decide what we think that those protections should be for others. We have the opportunity to choose what protections we choose for ourselves. If I want to mask up, if I want to vax, then that's my choice. I can do those things. And if they work, then they should protect me. But I don't get to identify what the threat is for another individual. If the threat to me is COVID, then I can do the things to protect myself from COVID, but I can't decide that the threat for you is also COVID. As we've heard testimony on here, people are identifying the threat as being some of these implementations that have come across these mandates. We've heard testimony that we allowed our children to suffer in schools. We allowed a lot of things, and we didn't know. We didn't anticipate that these would be the outcomes. We didn't know, and we didn't realize that there was going to be the difficulties and the risks involved with some of these measures. But this is why the protection of liberty is so important, because we don't know and we can't know what the future holds. It's okay to be afraid, but it's not okay to let fear steal our liberty and to govern us. So to use the phrase that's been very popularized in the last couple of years, let's use an abundance of caution to protect liberty first. And if you don't agree with me, that's okay, but I would urge you to immerse yourself in the Constitution and look at the language and the prioritization of liberty in this document here. Section 7 of Article 1 says that absolute arbitrary power over the lives, liberty, and property of free men exist nowhere in a republic. I think that these mandates are an exhibition of absolute and arbitrary power. It was done so under the guise of caution, but it's not reasonable to take someone's liberty. Benjamin Franklin said that those who sacrifice liberty for security deserve neither, and I would agree. And so I would urge a yes vote on this bill.
Any further comment from the committee? Representative Hornock.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So my name's on the bill, so it's not, you kind of know where I'm going with this. But what's been interesting to me is that we've heard a lot of testimony on this. Typically, we get a bunch of standardized emails and standardized testimony that just says the same thing for every email. What's interesting about this is that there have been people that have shared very sincere stories, not just a standard cut and paste email. So that's kind of what we've heard, is a lot of people sharing their stories. And, you know, I do take that to heart. I think that over the last couple of years, I think the pit bull of the federal government has come out barking. And I think that this bill will help fence that pit bull in. I think it's time to do that. So one of the things about this bill is it actually doesn't stop somebody from putting up a sign in their business that requests people wear masks or be vaccinated. They're free to still do that. So I just want to make that clear as well. But anyway, thank you. Thank you for allowing the discussion. Thanks for, this has been a good time, and we had an entire special session about this. It'd be nice to actually finally take care of this. Thank you.
Representative O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I liked what Representative Harnack just said. With business being able to post those signs to protect their employees. I thought we got the matrix all figured out when we had the special session. I'm very sad to hear that it's still going on, that a lot of people, and we also heard from Representative Closton that the CDC really screwed this up in the last year. But like Representative Penn said, we were all scared. This is something brand new. I want the historical vaccination data. I was a yes on this originally, and I was a strong no after hearing the Business Council and all the nurses. And now I'm a yes, but I'll probably vote no on the floor. But I want to hear more from the different people that said there's still questions to be heard. Thank you.
Question being called. Marilyn, if you'd now call the roll.
Yes. Representative Chadwick.
No.
Representative Clouston.
No.
Representative Hornock.
Aye.
Representative O'Hearn.
Aye.
Representative Penn.
Aye.
Representative Trujillo.
Aye.
Representative Ward.
Aye.
Representative Yin.
No.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
No. All right, with that, Representative Ward, you'll be carrying this on the floor? Okay. I saw Chairman Larson walk in. Lily, was he, I know he talked to you for a bit. Did he say he was hanging close, or?
He was.
Take about a 1-minute break and see if Chairman or Vice Chairman Larson's in the hall. And how many people are here to testify on Representative Larson's bill? Okay, I'll see if we can find him. We'll jam it out real quick here.
Is this 141?
There he is. Welcome to the front, Vice Chairman Larson.
No, it's 82.
And anyone here's who to talk about House Bill 82, kind of come on forward. I'm going to try to get this real quick. And you can. Thanks. And I'll wait.
This is tough.
I'm optimistic it'll be about a 4-minute bill, Representative Larson, and as soon as people get
Gotta
settled, we'll start.
Set the tone, though.
All right, everyone, please welcome Vice Chairman Larson back to Labor Health to present House Bill 82. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's nice to see everybody again this morning. Mr. Chairman, as we've engaged as the legislature to define the role of the state in providing services for mental health issues, we worked over the last couple of years for a pretty significant behavioral health redesign on focusing the resources of the state on priority populations. And in that process, we kept running into a little wonky situation when you have people who are titled to the state hospital. And there's a couple of ways that you can end up in the state hospital. One is through if you're picked up. So my favorite football team lost the game today. I'm maybe a little had a few more than I should have, and I'm kicked the neighbor's dog and throw a rock through his window, and they call the police and they says, we think this guy is nuts and he might hurt himself or hurt somebody else, and so they could take me in. And if they truly think that I am at risk myself or somebody else, and the evaluations, you can end up as under Title 25, getting some evaluations and determine the best way to help you resolve that problem. The other side of that is if my neighbor, because I threw the rock through his window, that's a crime. And if I got caught doing the crime, that's under Title 7. And the same process kind of takes place, except for you have to go through the judicial side. And if I think all of us are familiar that when someone commits a felony and then there's a plea or there's a process in the legal proceedings where they say he committed this, but he wasn't competent. He needed a psychological evaluation. That's under Title 7. And he would get an evaluation, an inpatient evaluation possibly, if the court ordered it at the state hospital in Evanston. The other side of that is if they commit a misdemeanor. And historically, misdemeanors were not an inpatient, but more of an outpatient type evaluation, and wouldn't require you to have an extended period of time at the state hospital. But over recent history, we've seen more people who in their legal proceedings are saying that I committed this misdemeanor but didn't have my mental capacities and need to be evaluated. And the problem with, there's two problems with that, is at the state hospital, you have a limited number of beds for Title 7 evaluations. And the beds are, as we redesigned the new hospital and as it's in place, those, for ligature issues, for protection, for oversight, all of those in place. And we have less Title 7 beds than you do Title 25 beds. Well, if that evaluation, if that bed for a person who's committed is taken up by a person who's who has committed a misdemeanor, there's a good chance that a person who's committed a felony is sitting in a county jail or some other holding facility and not getting the psychological services that they need. The other part of that is when you have both those populations needing inpatient evaluations, that then me, because I threw the rock through the neighbor's window, now sitting down in the county jail, the overall sentence for that may only be 30 days, 60 days, let's pick the number. And I could be waiting that long to get in and get an inpatient evaluation at the state hospital. So by the time I get my inpatient evaluation, I basically set out my time in a local jail, not getting any help that I possibly maybe needed. And so we run onto that as we was doing this behavioral health redesign, and we said, how can we maybe change that just a little bit to not remove the ability for somebody who needs inpatient services to get them, but for a misdemeanor requiring an inpatient just oftentimes seems a little over the top. So what this bill does, it goes into Title 7 in 711-303, and it says that if the person is charged with a felony, we keep the existing language that an examination of the accused in the Wyoming State Hospital on an inpatient or outpatient basis, or at a local mental health center on an inpatient or outpatient basis. Then we come down and we say in new language, if the accused is charged with the misdemeanor offenses, the order may include, but is not limited to, an examination of the accused at a local mental health center on an inpatient or outpatient basis, at his place of detention, or at the state hospital on an outpatient basis, unless if in that outpatient examination they determined that he should have inpatient examinations, then you would hold him over. So it's trying to keep those beds open, one, for more acute people or people who've had more serious crimes, and second, on an outpatient basis, trying to move these people who are languishing, who have committed misdemeanors, get that evaluation done sooner.
Okay, there are questions for Representative Larson. Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm wrapping my head around this a little bit. In the language, if the accused is charged with at least one felony offense, does this, so that's both it's not that they have to be a repeat offender, correct? It's just that they are charged with a felony.
Mr. Chairman, correct. Representative Hornock.
Okay. And then, Mr. Chairman, follow up. Does this make an allowance then? It sounds like it does, but just want to make sure that this does make an allowance. Say you have somebody picked up for a crime. Sometimes the police, it may help to interrogate that person not off-site, but at police headquarters. They have the facilities or something. They want to interrogate somebody at police headquarters. Does this allow that still?
Mr. Chairman, and I think, thank you, they have to be examined first, then charged. And so your point that they're interviewed or whatever, and we have some a good question for when we have the Supreme Court here to testify, but there's already an evaluation done. Then you go to the hearing, and then they determine in the hearing that there's going to be an evaluation, and the judge determines, is this evaluation going to be an inpatient or outpatient, for this person to determine competency to stand trial. Once they determine that, then they start to get that person restored to competency to where they can stand trial, if that's possible. And then if the person is not able to be restored to competency, then we have to figure out how that's, and you often see some of those people stay in the state hospital or until they do reach a point of competency or be able to be handled in the community.
Follow up?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman. So what you're trying to do then, if I understand this, is put that competency testing or evaluation into the hands of those who can properly make that determination?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Hornock, I think that that's always been the case. We're just trying to speed the process up some and take some of the bottlenecks out.
Further questions for Representative Larson? Representative Ward.
Yeah, just a quick summary. So if I understand this correctly, if you've been charged with a misdemeanor, you're not going to be examined for mental capability, simply.
Representative Larson?
Yes.
At a low level, yep.
And Mr. Chairman and Representative Ward, yes, are you competent to stand trial?
Understood. Thanks.
Further questions for Representative Larson? Seeing none. Department, thoughts on this bill while you're here on House Bill 149? That's what I meant, 82. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman,
Penfrey.
Matt Petrie, I'm the Senior Administrator of the Behavioral Health Division. We fully support this bill for the same reasons that Representative Larson has described. It really streamlines the process. It does not eliminate evaluations for individuals potentially charged with misdemeanors. It really just speeds up the process for the evaluation, their competency evaluations. And that benefits not only the state hospital, but also that individual who's been charged with a misdemeanor, as well as the detention facilities that hold those individuals. I would also like to just say that this is an initiative that, as Representative Larson indicated, is an initiative that we have had discussions with the Supreme Court about. There's been quite a bit of collaboration with the Supreme Court on behavioral health redesign, and we very much appreciate that cooperation.
Okay, questions for the Department of Health? Seeing none, thanks for being here. Other people wish to testify on this bill? Ms. Somerville?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Andy Somerville, Executive Director for the Wyoming Association of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Centers. Mr. Chairman, we are here to lend our support to the bill. Certainly, one of the biggest complaints as community mental health centers that we get from our sheriffs is the clogged jails. And in terms of having mental health, somebody with mental health issues sitting in a jail, especially long-term, is not ideal. That is not what we want to see. And so with the what we think this bill does is, as it was described, kind of unclog the pipeline a little bit. In anticipation of this bill potentially passing, we've already had some conversations about how the community mental health centers can support these outpatient exams in all of the counties, and work with our colleagues, our psychologist colleagues and other mental health colleagues to try to make sure that we have those resources ready to go to be prepared to do those evaluations on an outpatient basis. Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any questions.
Questions for Ms. Somerville? Seeing none.
Thank you.
Thanks. Other people here to testify on this bill? Mr. Heckman, welcome.
Hi, Hollis.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Dr. Hollis Hackman. I'm a psychologist from Sheridan. I represent the Wyoming Psychological Association. We're very much in support of this bill. We do have a half dozen psychologists in the state right now that specialize in doing these forensic types of evaluations. There's at least 4 of those folks here in town or in the county in this general area. We have somebody in Sheridan. We have other folks kind of throughout the state. And I've been speaking with some of those folks. They're more than willing to do these evaluations on an outpatient basis, Mr. Chairman. And with that, I would stand for any questions.
So the resources are there.
There are resources, yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Reverend Clouston.
Just a question with this, with these limited resources in Wyoming, is this something that could be done, over video telecommunications?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Clouston, that's a good question, and I have asked at least one of our forensic psychologists about this, and it can be done remotely. There is some difficulty with that, especially if the examination is going to involve assessment of intellectual function and some of those neuropsychological aspects of functioning. Some of those are difficult to do remotely, but much of this could be done remotely, and that is certainly an option as we're looking at this and going down the road with this, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Doctor. Anyone else wish to testify on this bill? Ms. Butler. And when I left the Judiciary Committee, I never thought you'd testify in front of my committee again, but here you are. Welcome, Supreme Court.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Elisa Butler. I am the State Court Administrator for the Wyoming Judicial Branch. And the judiciary is supportive of anything that will help move defendants through the system. And so when we go through competency evals, as Representative Larson discussed, there are often times when defendants are kept in jail for longer than their sentence would actually require because we need to get that competency eval done. So anything that would speed up that process and help get those comp evals done timely, we are in full support of.
Questions for the courts? Seeing none. Anyone else here wish to testify on this bill? Seeing none. Any closing comments? Representative Larson.
So, Mr. Chairman, and particularly to you new members of the committee, there's a couple of things that you've witnessed this morning that you'd be unaware of, but it's just really, really exciting. And that is, for the last umpteen years, all of these evals are being done at the state hospital. So if you're in Gillette, Sheridan, you know, head all the way down there, we start to make some changes, and one of our problems is as we move with this mental health is we hadn't taken into consideration really the impacts on the judicial system. So then when we started doing this behavioral health redesign and include how that impacts the judicial system and come to this, then we see that we could do this in a community mental health setting if they had the professionals to do it. They didn't. Well, then the Psychologists Association, Dr. Hackman, comes in and he says, well, by the way, we're not a community mental health center, but perhaps. And so if they had services in Gillette, in Sheridan that could serve this part of that part of the state and do it outpatient, it's just, you can almost feel this turn in providing services for mental health and a collaboration between all the providers that we have resources with, as well as not only remotely here in Wyoming, but maybe interstate. And so it's kind of a fun thing to actually see some of this stuff working.
Mental illness examinations, I guess it's a fun thing to see that we're making strides in local mental health. All right, seeing no further public comment, committee, what's your pleasure on House Bill 82? Moved by Representative Chadwick, seconded by Representative O'Hearn. Discussion or amendments, committee? No one wants to talk on this one, huh? Apparently not. Marilyn, if you'd call the roll on House Bill 82.
We will. Representative Chadwick.
Aye.
Representative Klauston.
Aye.
Representative Hornock.
Aye.
Representative O'Hearn.
Aye.
Representative Penn.
Aye.
Representative Trujillo.
Aye.
Representative Ward.
Aye.
Representative Yin.
Aye.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you. And you'll cover this bill on the floor, Representative Larson? Okay, thank you. We'll give it about 30 seconds to move the room around before we talk about House Bill 149 and see how far we get. Committee, as is standard practice, when a chairman or a member of this committee is presenting a bill, or when certainly the chairman is presenting, he turns over the committee to the vice chairman. So Representative Yin will be managing the committee throughout the duration of House Bill 149.
Mr. Chairman, I look forward to hearing your presentation on the bill. And just for the committee and the public's edification, the governor just issued a press release saying he tested positive for COVID. I met with the governor literally yesterday morning, so I figured I'll put on a mask.
Here we go.
Mr. Chairman, did you distribute that to everybody? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Sitting on my desk.
So committee, we are hearing House Bill 149, Protection of Healthcare Workers. The prime sponsor is, of course, the chairman, as he noted. So Chairman Zwanitzer, please introduce the bill.
Thank you, Chairman Yin and members of the Health Labor Committee. Pleased to present House Bill 149 to you today, Protection of Healthcare Workers. Just a little bit of background. First and foremost, this type of bill is an old friend of the legislature. It was heard about 8 years ago, and then again 2 years ago. Your Judiciary Committee made this topic an interim study. And at our final meeting of the Judiciary Committee, we had a full felony provision in this type of bill, and it failed by 1 vote. So there was no committee bill brought to the legislature this year from the Judiciary Committee. And so this bill came back as a private bill with my name on it. And it does, I would say, lessen the felony charge to a misdemeanor for the first act of violence, and then a second or subsequent charge would be a felony. We'll get to that. Primarily, committee, I want you to know that Wyoming is in fact the only state the only of our 50 states who has nothing on our books when it comes to protection of our healthcare workers. And we protect all sorts of other service occupations, police, firefighters, even people who are training service dogs have certain higher thresholds of care against them if people commit assault or battery on them. And there certainly are assault and battery provisions that are still in place for a full-on assault or battery against a healthcare worker. But again, this occupation, as you'll hear, is 6 or 7 times higher to have violence committed against them. So let me walk you through the mechanics of the legislation, Chairman Yin, and then you'll hear testimony today. And then if you'd let me clean up for anything that's not said by the people here to present, I can do that at that time. So quickly walking through the bill, and let me know if anybody has questions I can delineate further. Just on page 2, right, we're starting with this topic of threat of violence, and you can read there in Romanet A, threatens to commit an offense involving bodily injury, death, or property damage of that $1,000. You also have an intent statute in there. And then we're doing a kind of a bifurcation of threat or assault or battery there on page 3. And you can see there starting on line 14, the elements are knows or reasonably should know that the person is a healthcare provider at the time of the assault, and the healthcare provider has to be performing their duties at the time, right? So just because you know someone is a nurse and it's the weekend and they're not working, this doesn't apply. It has to be in the healthcare setting for this to come into effect. You'll find that same language mirrored on page 4. And then again, the penalty section is on page 5. There on lines 8 through 11. For a first offense, it's a misdemeanor of 2 days imprisonment and not more than 6 months. And this fine is at $1,000. And then you'll see for subsequent offense, it is a felony. And so I don't think anyone wants to create more felonies unnecessarily, but I do think if you have a previous misdemeanor conviction in this area and you do it again and assault a healthcare worker who is trying to assist you, that is when the felony provision would come into place. On page 6, you'll see that the amendment that I passed out does have a qualifier there between lines 19 and 20 on making sure these healthcare facilities are only 25 employees or more. So there was some discussion that I'm not trying to put some of these restrictions, especially the reporting requirements, on your local dentist or small clinic, but certainly in a large-scale healthcare facility of more than 25 employees, these rules would be in effect. Then on page 7, some of the legal language required that you have to post a sign, and based on precedent here in the legislature and the legal world, you'll see there on lines like 7 through 15, what the sign has to look like, where it has to be posted, how big a sign has to be, all those things to kind of qualify that someone should have seen the signage and should know that they are breaking a law. You'll see that we're moving on the bottom of page 7 and page 8, statistics that the health department needs to collect, and I know they're here today. But I think everyone agrees that violence against healthcare workers is underreported, right? Many people in our healthcare system just say, hey, that's part of the job. And unless they have serious injury, they don't report it. They don't want to get in trouble. They just kind of view that as helping take care of a patient. Then on the bottom of page 8, that puts kind of the onus on the institution of 25 more to have a workplace violence prevention plan in place, right? So we're trying to not only make sure they're safe, but we need to make sure those employees in those facilities know that they have some protections and they have rights in place not to be assaulted or harassed or threatened to be killed. And I think you'll hear lots of testimony from people about what's gone on, especially since COVID, that people are just angrier, as you're all well aware, right? And some of that is translating into violence and certain legitimate threats of violence against our healthcare community. Moving on, you'll see in the amendment that I'm deleting all of the kind of overly burdensome reporting factors that after talking to people, they're everything on after line 5 on page 10 through line 3 on page 11. The amendment deletes. These are things that not all facilities of 25 or more might have in place, and I certainly don't want to make this bill force healthcare facilities to put more regulations unnecessarily in place on ensuring they have sufficient security systems, things that we probably shouldn't do codifying in law. And then on page 11, you'll see in the amendment, lines 12 and 13, we're deleting appropriate licensing authority for the institution. again, this is kind of broad-based among everything 25 employees or more, and I didn't want to unnecessarily penalize anyone. And then we're also, after more discussion on lines 20 and 21, deleting that not later than 24 hours. So they shall report the incident, but in the healthcare world, things happen at weird times and people's shifts, and until you get a full investigation, you might not want to report. Top of page 12 is just the retaliation statutes. You report in good faith. You're protected from retaliation. And that's really the bill that goes into effect July 1st. Mr. Chairman, happy to answer more questions in depth, or I'll get out of the way so you can hear some public comment.
Thank you, Chairman Swanett, sir. Does anyone on the committee have a question? Representative O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. You can still get, all these would still affect those that don't work in a nursing care facility of more than 25 people, correct? So you still can't be mean to a nurse care facility or nurser in a smaller facility, correct?
Chairman Swanett, sir.
Chairman Yin, well, Representative O'Hearn, certainly you should never be mean to your healthcare people who are trying to help you. And so this bill is really pretty much a copy of the interim joint judiciary bill that, as we're working through what we believe would be palatable to the majority of the legislature, to have something on the books. And so we're not here to penalize anyone. We're just here to try to protect our healthcare workers. So this bill would only be effective if you threaten violence or assault a healthcare worker in a facility of 25 or more employees. Certainly, if you committed assault or battery on a facility less than that, you would still have the current scheme of crimes in place.
Follow up? Oh, Representative Penn.
Thank you. Do I call you chairman since you're the
I think as I serve
interim
as
chair?
yeah, as I serve as chair while the chairman's down there, just call me chairman. It's
Thank
fine.
you, Chairman. What's currently happening? If a nurse gets punched in the face, what are we doing right now?
And Mr. Chairman, Representative Penn, I think that varies at every facility. You'll hear from, some of it depends on where in Wyoming you are. So in some people, are very strong on reporting in some of our hospitals or nursing home facilities. Some, will admit that it's just part of the job. So if it rises to the level of something that you would need to have to go to the hospital, or you've been assaulted or you're already in the hospital, but that level of a crime, you still have simple assault and battery in place and that host of crimes. This is really A, to encourage reporting, and B, to really help facilities understand that there is something in place that they need to be protecting their workers. And kind of the third reason for the bill is being the only state that has nothing in place. All of our facilities are hiring traveling nurses and medical staff. It's a very competitive environment right now, and we certainly don't want people considering moving to Wyoming to say, Wyoming's the only law that doesn't have any protections in place for that environment. And so this is somewhat a competitive aspect as well, just to have something so we're not the big black hole in the middle of the country that doesn't protect our healthcare workers.
Questions? Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The standard assault and battery in all the normal law currently does apply. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ward, yes, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Questions from the committee? Representative Hornock, and then we'll go to Representative Closton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I understand we can easily define assault and battery. How do we define violence? Who makes that determination?
Mr. Chairman.
Well, Chairman and Representative Hornock, I guess ultimately when you call the police, when it's reported, they would make an assessment and then turn over that information to your county or district attorney. You will see that we are adding threat of violence there on page 2, starting in 16 on, sometimes it's not violence, but there's been threats to harm, and you call that in and, it's a misdemeanor offense, or the police take a while to get there to file the report. And you'll hear from some facilities, they may only have one officer in town, or their local law enforcement may not treat it with what that facility thinks it should be due. And so having further delineation in the law that kind of strengthens the law, there is some belief that that would encourage your local law enforcement to take some of this more seriously as well.
Any follow-up? Representative Hornock.
Yeah, follow up. So just what if somebody walks in with Tourette's syndrome or somebody really doesn't like to get a shot and can't help but, swear and curse? Who defines that violence? It seems like if a nurse would feel like there's a threat when there's really not, that's a question. I'm a little concerned there.
Yeah, Chairman Yin, Representative Hornock, and you'll hear a lot of
Chairman.
testimony on situations. I believe, most healthcare workers would say there are some people who have mental health issues, behavioral health issues they can't help, and that's not the population we're talking about. Those assaults occur, but people who A, are in their right state of mind, or B, people who are on a substance, such as being intoxicated, similar to being, drunk driving, you're still held responsible for that. So if you assault a healthcare worker while intoxicated, you probably should still be held, if there's no underlying health condition, liable for any damages you cause. But there's a lot of great stories out there, and I know people can only be here today, so I'd be happy to turn it over to the public behind me.
So one more question from Representative Closton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have we seen with this consistent messaging in other states, have we seen any decrease in violence or threats against healthcare workers?
Mr. Chairman, if you know.
Chairman Yin, Representative Clouston, I think you'll hear across the board incidents of violence have been increasing dramatically in the past 2 years in every state, as well as here in Wyoming. I'm not sure if some of the groups could tell you what those numbers are in other states, but they could certainly, most of our larger facilities are starting to keep track of the number of incidents, and it is alarming, quite frankly.
So just for the committee, we only have 13 minutes, and I would like to work the bill before we go back upstairs. So if there are any other questions, otherwise we'll go to public comment. Agencies first, if there are any agencies. Don't believe so. So, please come up. Introduce yourself for the committee, and then the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Laura Hudspeth, and I serve as the State Survey Agency Director and Administrator with the Wyoming Department of Health for Healthcare Licensing and Surveys. And we just have a couple comments. The Department of Health is noted in this bill, and certainly posting the education, developing the template, all of those actions are easily implemented. I think we just have some questions regarding the definition of a healthcare institution, exactly what businesses, healthcare facilities does that cover? And also, in terms of licensing and revoking a license, the statute in the bill really speaks to the 352905 to our licensed healthcare facilities. So we just are questioning whether or not we have oversight for all of the healthcare institutions that would be covered under this bill.
Ms. Hudspeth, could you repeat that statutory designation that covers licensed healthcare facilities?
It's on page 12, and it refers to revoking a license. It's 352905.
Ms. Hudspeth, so is there another definition of healthcare institution that's already in statutes covered by the Department of Health? Do you know?
Chairman Yin, great question. Not that I'm aware of. We do have a listing of all of the healthcare facilities that we license in the state that we have statutory authority for. And those are listed in 352901. But Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware of another definition, but perhaps there is.
Any questions from the committee? For Ms. Hudspeth, Representative Penn.
Thank you, Chairman. Let me make sure I understand. You said that you think that some of these implementations that are discussed here as far as the education piece and that sort of thing will be fairly easily implemented. However, your concern mainly is just this potential for it to jeopardize your licensing and those types of things.
I think our question, Mr. Chairman, Representative Penn, is what authority do we have in terms of enforcement? What are they going to be urgent care facilities, which we do not license? What actual facilities or businesses would be included in this bill, and then to ensure that the Department of Health has the appropriate authority and enforcement over those.
Representative Penn, any follow-up? Representative Hornock, and then I'll come to the other side.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So we will discuss an amendment about defining this with 25 people or more. Does that help?
Ms. Hudspeth?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Hornick, I'm not sure, for example, urgent care clinics, we don't have, the department currently doesn't have authority over that type of a facility. So I think the question is, what are the facilities, the type of businesses that the Department of Health is asking to have oversight and enforcement of?
Any other follow-up? Representative Hornock? Nope. Anyone from this side, any questions? Nope. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any public comment? Any other agencies? Otherwise, we'll go to regular public comment. Please come up. Use all the chairs. Introduce yourselves and then the floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished representatives, my name is Tim Thornell, President and CEO of Cheyenne Regional Medical Center. I'm accompanied with two of our nurses, and I'll have them introduce themselves in just a moment. I'm here just to give you a few statistics, a little bit of information nationally, and then talk to you specifically about locally what's happening with regards to workplace violence. So we're here today to speak in favor and support of House Bill 149. Healthcare workers nationwide experience violence at the rate of about 6 times the national average of any other worker. In the last 5 years, there have been a 10% increase in violence against nurses specifically. 75% of non-fatal workplace violence injuries occur in a healthcare setting, which is up 50% since 2016. This is clearly a challenge that we are facing in healthcare. Specifically at Cheyenne Regional Medical Center, we average about 30 cases of reported workplace violence a quarter. And as Chairman Zwanitzer pointed out, workplace violence is frequently underreported. Of those that are reported to us, more than half of those are physical in nature. Less than 1/4 of the patients who commit these assaults have either a mental health concern or a substance abuse concern. So that is the minority of the patients that are inflicting assault on our employees. And just to give you a couple of examples of assault that has been experienced just this past 12 months, we've had our staff slapped and scratched and shoved against the door, grabbed by the head and slammed into the door, grabbed by the arms and reached for their throat, punched in the chest, kicked in the face, and their lives threatened. And that has all happened in the last 12 months at our hospital alone. At a time in which healthcare workers are at a premium all across the nation, we are working so hard, feverishly hard, to try and hire and bring in more staff, more nurses specifically. We still have today 39 agency or traveler nurses that we depend upon to provide care, and we are trying so hard to find permanent staff in those roles, and every hospital in Wyoming is facing similar situations. As Chairman Zwanitzer pointed out, we're the lone state that has a law that addresses this specific issue. So it is a hindrance in us recruiting more healthcare workers, nurses specifically, to our hospitals here in Wyoming. And I'll leave you with one specific example to this point. Every Monday, we do new employee orientation for new staff that join our hospital. Every Monday, I am there talking to them. And at the end, they have a chance to ask me questions. And 2 months ago, I was asked a question by a new nurse joining us. She had been a traveler in our hospital and actually decided to join us. She had a great experience here, so we're happy that she wanted to join us permanently. And her question to me was, Tim, we know you as a hospital do great work protecting your patients, but what do you do to protect your staff? Because it is difficult to be a nurse today. And that's the question that we're faced with and we have to answer, and really speaks to our challenge in staffing hospitals today. With that, I would ask to turn it over to either Derek or Christina, two nurses that work frontline staff in our hospital.
Please, whoever wants to go first.
Chairman Yin, representatives, I apologize. This is actually my first time before a committee in our house, so
Please.
I am a little bit nervous today, but
No
I will
worries.
do my
You're welcome
best.
here anytime.
My name is Derek Nelson, and I am a registered nurse at Cheyenne Regional Medical Center. As such, I actually have been in healthcare for approximately 20 years now. I started off as a CNA out of high school and have worked my way up to be a clinical nurse educator today. In my role currently at Cheyenne Regional, I oversee our violence prevention program, specifically our programs that deal with or teach our employees how to properly verbally de-escalate a patient, or how to potentially disengage from a patient should they attempt to violently assault one of our healthcare workers. So I do have some fairly intimate knowledge of workplace violence, specifically in the healthcare setting. I can speak to national efforts in that workplace violence against healthcare workers has actually reached the forefront of the Joint Commission, so much so that it is actually a national patient safety goal that was established in 2022 because of the quote-unquote epidemic of healthcare violence within the United States. Personally, I can speak to having been assaulted on many occasions by patients within the hospital setting. My primary background before moving to clinical education was actually emergency medicine. And so in emergency medicine, we see anybody that walks through our doors for whatever reason they may choose to come through our doors. And in many occasions, we do evaluate patients that are either under the influence of alcohol or substances such as methamphetamines or other illicit or recreational substances. And I can say for certain from my own personal experience that not a day went by that I worked in the ER setting that a staff was not assaulted, either by being hit, punched, kicked, or something of that nature, spit at, or threatened. I've personally have had my life threatened on numerous occasions and have reported this to our security team at the hospital. I can remember actually the first time that I was assaulted by a patient. This individual was under the influence of alcohol, and it was when I was 18 years old in 2004 as a healthcare worker, and it's only happened countless times since then. This particular individual needed to get up and go to the bathroom and was unsteady on their feet. So as a healthcare worker, I assisted them to the bathroom. But because they were under the influence of a substance, they were not aware of what was going on. And they punched me in the face, breaking my glasses and causing some temporary issues with my right eye. So I have personally been affected by this, and I urge you as the committee to please pass this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Christina, if you want to continue before we go to questions for everybody.
My name is Chris. I am also a registered nurse with Cheyenne Regional Medical Center. My background is critical care. I'm an ICU nurse. I still work the floor. I'm currently the nursing practice expert at the hospital. I have worked as an EMT. I'm currently a military flight nurse. I've been a CNA. I have worked in the ER. I've worked many different roles in healthcare, and in every single one of those roles, I have been assaulted. I've been assaulted, I've been kicked, I've been punched, I have been knocked down, I've been shoved into walls. I have had people threaten my family members and myself as well. It is a definite epidemic in healthcare right now. I also teach with the CPI program at the hospital, so I am exposed to a lot of other different nurses as well. I can tell you that every single class that I have, we all tell stories about how we've been assaulted. People have been bitten, they have been kicked. I have had CNAs who have been choked with their own lanyards and their own badges. This happens on the regular basis. I have also been told by traveler nurses that when they come to the state of Wyoming, they have to prepare themselves to be threatened more than they are in other states. And this has been coming up more in the past 2 years that I've heard this. I have a personal friend who works in Colorado and has said that she has been assaulted more in the last 2.5 years that she's worked in the state of Wyoming than she is in Colorado, and she still works there as well. Nursing, the profession of nursing, if you didn't know, was just nominated as the most respected profession again for the 23rd year in a row. The public does respect us, but with that respect comes comfort, and with that comfort that we offer, I think allows them to lash out in ways that they normally wouldn't to other professions. What also sets us apart is after I'm assaulted, I don't get to walk away. I have to go back into that room and I have to care for that patient that just kicked me or hit me or choked me. Or I have to go into the room of the patient that assaulted my coworker and sent them to the ER. I have had to take over those assignments, and it's very, very difficult to look that person in the eye and have empathy and care for them when they hurt me or my coworker or my friend or my CNA. It makes my job very difficult. Thank you, council, for listening, and we absolutely hope that you'll pass this.
Chris, thank you. Could you just give us your last name just for the record?
I'm sorry, it's Chris McAfee.
McAfee. Committee, are there any questions for Mr. Thornell or any of the nurses?
Chairman, thank you.
Representative Penn.
My question is for Mr. Thornell. You said that there's about 30 cases a quarter of assault. What is how has the response been for those as far as law enforcement? If law enforcement needs to be called, what kind of responses are you getting?
Mr. Thornell.
Yes,
please.
Mr. Chairman, Representative. So the response is varied, and not every assault that gets recorded with us gets reported to the authorities. It'll depend on the severity of the assault that's there. And it's met with mixed reviews at times. So anything can happen from coming in, simply a report being taken, to the assaulting person ultimately being arrested. Frequently it's challenging because they're in the middle of care, so they're not able to be, apprehended at that particular time. If they need to be admitted, they may be there for days. So it becomes a logistical challenge we appreciate for law enforcement to arrest them thereafter. They may be arrested, and then again, as it gets prosecuted, a variety of things happen there. Sometimes it goes through fruition, and sometimes it gets dropped along the way for a variety of reasons.
Any follow-up? Yep,
And-
Representative Penn.
Thank you, Chairman. And so are they responding to you when you call them? Law enforcement, when you call them, do they come?
Mr. Thornell, if you know.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes, so law enforcement does respond. They do come out to our facility, and they're actually very quick to respond. We are fortunate at Cheyenne Regional Medical Center to also have our own internal security force, and they're a pretty robust force that we have. Many hospitals don't have the luxury of the robust security force that we have, and they too have a relationship with our local law enforcement. So I would say, get very good response from them. If anything is challenging, it's the process thereafter.
Please, Mr. Nelson.
Chairman Yin, Representative Penn. In my interactions with the law enforcement in our local area, law enforcement has repeatedly reinforced, they have responded appropriately, yes, but they have repeatedly enforced to me that because the individual that has assaulted our staff members or has been reported to have assaulted staff members has not actually broken any law, or they did not observe it, or they did not commit enough damage or injury to warrant current assault charges, that they were unable to do anything about it. I can speak to an issue recently that happened on our behavioral health unit in which a individual basically destroyed an area of our behavioral health unit. And in working with Cheyenne PD, the only way that they were able to remove this individual from our behavioral health unit was because he damaged more than $1,000 worth of property, and therefore they were able to charge him under that law and not any assault laws.
Any other questions from the committee? If not, So let's keep it to them, and then we'll figure out what we're doing after. So Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you just clarify what this bill would change? So there's a process in place that you guys have. other than reporting or allowing the reporting a little bit more, how will this help? What will it change?
Any of you, if you are able to answer.
Representative Yin, Chairman Yin, I apologize. Representative Hornock. In my opinion, that this bill would actually do a couple of things for healthcare workers. One, it's a huge show of support for us as healthcare workers. I can definitely speak to the general feeling of the healthcare community in that the legislature does not support us because and this is my personal opinion, not Cheyenne Regional, but I do feel that the legislature does not support us because this bill has died so many times in our legislature. I also feel that the ability to tell an individual, and I know for certain that this is the case, the ability to tell an individual that there are consequences for their actions outside of normal assault charges, which again, we've had trouble with the law enforcement agencies enforcing those, that being able to tell somebody that assaulting a healthcare worker is prudent and does face penalties is a benefit. I can also speak to numerous studies across the United States, which this is still currently a very new area of research because of its recent popularity with the COVID-19 pandemic. But research has shown that laws across the United States do have an effect on reducing healthcare violence against staff members.
Mr. Chairman.
Please,
If I
Mr.
may
Cornell.
also respond, Mr. Chairman, Representative. I believe in addition to certainly showing support to our local healthcare workers, which this bill certainly does, one of its goals is to increase reporting. Again, we all know this is underreported, and we also know in general what we measure, we tend to do better at. So the better we can measure this, the better we can address the issue. And I think so important to recognize as well, being the only state that doesn't have a law specifically addressing this, this puts us at a significant disadvantage for recruiting nurses. So this really levels the playing field for Wyoming to be able to recruit healthcare workers, specifically nurses, but healthcare workers in general, to our state at a time in which we so desperately need them.
Representative Trujillo.
Question. So in your guys' testimony, I'm listening to that these assaults are happening and they are mentally disabled at times and under the influence of maybe drugs and alcohol, which is also a mental illness because it's, what do you suggest? How does this help the mentally disabled? Are we going to jail them and fine them? And as far as underreporting, is that not a business practice to report it? You testified that you don't report everything to the police. Well, that right there is a form of underreporting. So could it not be a business practice?
Mr. Thornell.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, thank you for the question. Yes, so it becomes a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy to some extent about not reporting. If our nurses or whomever is being assaulted is not feeling support from the community at large, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's the district attorney's office or whomever, then they're less likely to report. So I think anything we can do to help encourage that reporting is so important. And then answering the first part of your question a little more specifically, as I mentioned earlier on in my testimony, as we look at Cheyenne Regional in particular, less than 1/4 of the assaults are actually associated with either behavioral health or substance abuse. So the vast majority do not fall in that category. So that's the issue that we're really trying to address there. In healthcare, we certainly have empathy for and work differently with those with behavioral health challenges. In the ER in particular, we have a separate unit that actually manages our behavioral health patients for that specific reason.
So members, we're running about 10 minutes late. And I do want to make sure that we're up there for the second and third readings. How many people in the audience are looking to testify on this bill? 2, 3. I don't think we're going to be able to get all that testimony in and then work the bill. So I would suggest to the chairman, if he's okay with it, to carry this bill over to Wednesday. Are those who want to testify still be able to make it then? Great. So thank you for giving that testimony. And I know any of our members, if they have other questions, they can come to you personally. So very much thank you for giving your story.
Thank you.
And with that, I believe we are adjourned.